Welcome to today's EESI podcast. Our subject, 2020 Tech, IT, and Security Trends. And our special guest is Ke Shen, Cybersecurity Specialist at EESI. Many of you might know that in July, 100 million Capital One records were exposed in a data breach. What you probably don't know is that's not even one of the top 10 data breaches in the past few years. That's how significant and immense this problem of security and protection is for businesses, and in particular for small businesses who are often the victims of ransomware. Ke, what are the three most important 2020 issues or trends for IT and security for employers? What do you think they are?
Well, Lou, like you were saying, data collection, protection, and security is huge. There have been so many data breaches, like you said. Another buzzword that you'll see in 2020 is edge computing, like IoT and the cloud before it. And finally, automation is a huge topic right now and will continue to be in the next few years.
Let's talk about automation. There's different types of automation. It's already happening, will only continue to become more prevalent in 2020, and it can provide a real competitive edge if implemented well. It can be a real game changer for a small business owner. Talk about automation in 2020 and what do small business owners need to be thinking about in order to take advantage of these trends?
In general, you'll want to automate anything that can be automated. So traditionally speaking, automation, you're thinking about a task or a process or even a workflow that is monotonous, it is repetitive, and a lot of time is spent doing it. A good example of like a small scale automation, I used to have to go through the ACH change logs every day and to look at all the ACH changes that were made the previous day and see if there are any fraudulent changes. My coworker Brandon helped me out by writing a small script that turned this hour to an hour and a half long process to a 10-minute process.
So that's one example of basic automation that can save time and far fewer errors than if it was being done by a person. But in addition, there's also robotic processes.
Yeah, so RPA, robotic process automation, is a little different than the standard traditional automation that you would think. Traditionally, you would have to hire a developer to work on the back end and write code to automate a certain thing. RPAs actually function on the front end and they can mimic actions of a human. So for example, if you're in your software, you have a UI, a human agent would click buttons, move things around, send emails, forward emails, and RPA can do all of that in the front end. So it makes adopting this kind of automation a lot cheaper. And it could also be relatively quickly implemented.
You also mentioned edge computing. What is edge computing and how does it work?
So edge computing is basically an extension of IoT and cloud technologies that we have now. Traditionally, you would have the device talk to a centralized data server, and then it would get instructions back, and then the magic happens. Edge computing is kind of flipping that on its head so that the device in front of you is doing the computational work. It's figuring out what it needs to do before talking to the mothership. So a good example of this is internet-connected security cameras, right? If you have an internet-connected security camera that records everything it sees and sends it up to the cloud, where then you or the server can decide what footage is important and what you want to do with it, that's okay if you got one camera. But if you've got 100 cameras, or 1,000 cameras that are doing this, suddenly you've got a bandwidth issue and it's going to be very expensive. What edge computing does is instead of it recording everything and sending it to the cloud, it will figure out for itself what is important and only send that to the cloud so you can access the most important stuff.
A good example of that would also be automated cars, wouldn't it?
Right. Autonomous cars is another great example. If you're following the traditional model and all the sensors and cameras on the car has to communicate to the server and then wait for a command to come back, the seconds that take while you're driving on the road could be life or death. So instead of doing that, the car itself can figure out what it does. It has enough computational power to make the decisions, and then it can, get updates from the cloud.
You also mentioned data collection, protection, and security. Tell us about what's going on in that field, and then perhaps something that small business owners can do to protect their company and their clients.
Like you were mentioning before, where you're having hundreds of millions of breaches, and this is happening all over the place, which has led to laws like GDPR and CCPA to come into effect. And GDPR is effective if you're doing business in Europe. CCPA is effective if you're doing business in California. But if you're not in either of those places, you don't have to panic right now, but laws like this will be coming to all of us. This is a global trend that is gaining traction.
Now, for those who don't know, what is GDPR and what is CCPA?
So both are laws that serve to protect the user's data and give control of that data to the consumer. But generally, it's where the user can request whatever data that you as a business have on them, and generally they'll be able to request that you delete that data.
The controls shifts over to the owner of the data, not to the owner, but to the actual person the data is being collected on, is what you're saying.
Right. So the owner then becomes the consumer, not the business.
You were talking about the data breach. We were talking about the data breach and what an issue that's become. What is something concrete that a small business owner can do to help protect data right now? What's something simple and concrete?
Sure. So something simple you can do is multi-factor authentication. If you use Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Gmail, all of those websites have MFA as an option for you to use, and I highly recommend you do. And we've implemented MFA here for all of our portals anywhere that we have data. So MFA stands for multi-factor authentication. So traditionally, if you were to log into a website, it'll ask for your username and password. That is one factor of authentication. That is something you know, presumably. But hackers have been getting really good at either guessing what you know, because people do generally use poor passwords, or brute forcing passwords that aren't long enough or have general dictionary words in them. MFA is a great way to add another layer of security. So you'll still need your username and password, but then you'll need a second factor of authentication, which is something you have. So generally that's either a little token generator or an app on your mobile device.
So, for example, with your bank, you might enter your username and password. In the past, that would be enough. But now, to make it safer, of course, and to protect your data and your accounts, it might request to send you a security code as a message to your phone and ask you to enter that security code as well into the numbers on screen or to the empty boxes that are on the screen. That would be an example of MFA, correct?
That is correct.
How would a small business owner go about adding that additional layer to their company?
Well, if you're using any of the popular Office suites like Microsoft Office or Office 365 from Microsoft, or even apps for work with Google, they already all have MFA as an option, but it's not automatically enabled, so you will have to go in and enable it. Do think carefully about how you're going to go about enabling it. When you go from a environment without MFA to an environment with MFA, the initial activation may be jarring to some of your users. If they're used to logging in with just the username and password, they may not expect to see a second screen come up asking for additional verification.
What is a simple way that a small business owner can help their company to become more secure regarding passwords?
Password managers like LastPass would be a great way to secure passwords. Generally speaking, looking at the statistics, people generally create bad passwords. Passwords with names of family members, of pets, birth dates, anything that could be easily guessed from your social media page would not make a good password. And then another problem is nowadays we all have, 15, 20 accounts all over the place that require, if you want to be secure, requires 15 or 20 different unique passwords. And that is hard to remember. So that's where password managers come in.
So how does LastPass solve those issues?
So a password manager like LastPass will store your passwords, your username and password combinations for various sites into a what they call a vault. So you can log into LastPass with your master credentials, your master password, and then from there on, you won't have to remember the passwords for all of your other applications.
In addition to that, I think LastPass also helps you develop passwords that are not going to be easy for any hacker to find. Is that correct?
They can help you generate a random password with randomized characters, numbers, special characters. You have some options there. And then you can also set the length of the password from 8 characters long to 25 characters long.
Okay, let's summarize. What are the 3 most important points you want to make about 2020 tech, security, and IT trends?
Well, it is critical for small businesses to be efficient and agile, and you can use the tools for automation to do that. And in this day and age, with more devices and software constantly collecting data on us, it's critical that personal data is protected and kept private.
2020 promises to be an important year for small business owners in the area of data security and IT. If you'd like assistance or more information about ways to help protect your company, contact EESI at risk@eesipeo.com or call 210-495-1171 and ask to speak with an EESI HR business partner. Again, that email address is risk@eesipeo.com or call 210-495-1171. Thank you for listening to today's podcast, part of our goal at EESI to help you simplify business.